Hey y'all, it's Betty. Welcome back to another True Crime Tuesday. I am feeling some type of way about today's story because there's a lot of variables that go into it, and I just feel like it can go so many ways. And even though the story itself, as far as what they determined it was and what they closed the case on, doesn't make much sense, there's so many things that just don't align for other theories of the events that could have gone on as well. So I am really excited to hear you guys go off in the comments down below and kind of give me your thoughts and opinions, because the farther I read on into it, the deeper I would get into the videos and just more details in regards to the case, the more I was just like confused on how I felt. And I'm just gonna go ahead and jump right into it so that we can get started, and hopefully it's a case that you have some sort of idea or have heard of, since it is something that happened more recently back in 2013, but there was so much news coverage on it and I feel like so many people may have forgotten about it. I have not found too much information in regards to his parents and if they're still fighting for anything, but if they are,
but we gonna still stand up for Kendrick Johnson. We ain't going nowhere. We here. We claim it's 2019, Kendrick here, but if it ain't, guess what? They gonna kill us again in 2020, 2021, 2022. Continue, we ain't going nowhere. I'm gonna tell them like I told them from day one. They messed around and killed the wrong child. Come on, y'all, say Kendrick Johnson. Kendrick Johnson. It's not matter whether you know it or not. While y'all all I'm standing right now, what about their child? One day it could be their child.
My absolute condolences go out to you guys. I really hope that if you are still seeking justice, you do find it and that you do find closure in all of this, because in general, regardless of the outcome, you do end up finding an answer. It's never gonna hurt any less, I feel like. So with that being said, today we are talking about the story of Kendrick Johnson. Kendrick Johnson was a 17-year-old boy, and he went to a high school in Valdosta, I can't pronounce that name, but it's in Georgia, and he was actually discovered on January 11th of 2013. He was found in a rolled up mat, and he was found by other students that were kind of jumping around the mats, and it was something that was common, that a lot of students kind of messed around with the mats. There was even some stating that a lot of the students would throw their shoes behind the mats to kind of store them in between blocks, or in my case when I was in high school it was periods, so I might throw periods in there every here and there because that's the way that I know it. I don't really understand the blocks, but either way, his body was found dead by another student. They went ahead and contacted teachers, and they had paramedics report to the school, and they unrolled his body, and they automatically realized, and the paramedics noted in their notes, that he had bruising on his jaw and on his neck, and the hole was not that big. From what I was able to get online, they said that the mats stood about 6 feet tall and about 3 feet wide. So the hole was not that big, and they mentioned that his shoulders were actually bigger than the hole that the mat was the size of. So when they bring up the cause of death, it's really complicated to try to understand and try to just be okay with that answer, simply because it wouldn't make sense for someone whose shoulders are larger than a hole that you're planning on jumping into. Like, how do you not get stuck in the hole which is smaller than what you're trying to get yourself into. To like, how do you not get stuck on your way in? I just don't understand how he would have entered it with his shoulders being larger, other than him obviously squeezing himself in, which would be pretty strange. But all bets are out there at this point because this case is actually closed. They ruled the death an accident, and the reason why they ruled it an accident is because, I'm gonna post the picture on the screen here, this shoe was found at the end of the mat, and what they determined was that Kendrick was trying to get inside the mat while it was standing up 6 feet straight up. He tried jumping inside to reach his shoe, and when he did that, the official cause of death by the coroner is positional asphyxia. Since he was upside down, they determined that anyone that was basically squished with their blood flowing all down their head for as long as he was would have died. So when they determined that accidental by the police station, it was really hard for his family to just accept that it was some sort of freak accident and that he would have jumped into a mat and died that way. Another reason why it was hard for them to accept that that's how he died was because there was a small pool of blood on the floor. So picture the mat like this, and this is the floor. There was a small pool of blood like right under where his head would have been, and what they determined that was that after his heart stopped beating, blood came rushing out of him, and that's what caused the puddle of blood. The argument or the problem with that is that his shoe was also at the bottom of that mat, because remember, according to them, he was reaching into the mat to grab his tennis shoe that he had thrown in there. And when they brought out the shoe had absolutely no blood. So, and there's a picture of it as well, so I'm gonna put the picture here for you guys to see it yourself. There's no blood on the shoe, so it was kind of hard to think about how his blood would have came out while he was in the mat, and with the shoe being what his target was, how did no blood get on the shoe was a big question. And even when I saw that, I'm like, yeah, that doesn't make very much sense. It almost makes you think that the shoe was placed there after his body was found, and they're like, oh, this is what he was reaching for. Like, this was a complete accident. He was reaching for the shoe. That's why he was in the mat to begin with. So that was my first red flag, that I was like, something doesn't seem right. Well, not my first, it was one of just many. And later on in the investigation, he ends up getting a second autopsy report by someone that they chose to do a second autopsy on him. And when they pulled his body out of his grave and did the second autopsy, they found that his organs were missing. So the second coroner that was going to go in and do an autopsy on him opened him up and found that his brain, everything from his head all the way to his pelvis, was missing. All of his organs were gone, and in place of them, he was stuffed with newspaper. So the coroner before said that they had, after the autopsy, they had delivered his body to the funeral home, which the Johnsons had picked, and they later delivered his organs. And according to the funeral home, when they delivered his organs, they were basically completely messed up. They were not good enough to put back into his body, according to them. So instead, they got rid of his organs and stuffed him with newspaper, which in the news, which I'll be posting some newscasting videos throughout this video. In the news, they kind of throw out there that they contacted the main association of coroners and how autopsies are done, and that's not a regular practice for any autopsies at all, for you to take the organs and even if they're a mess, you just replace it with newspaper. It's not something that's practiced, it's not something that's done. So that was just another thing that they kind of had to accept that they've lost, is that their son wasn't even, he wasn't complete when he was put into his grave, and it was harder for the second autopsy to get done, but it was able to get done regardless, because when they pulled his body out, they did again see the bruising around his face and neck, and the second coroner determined that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the neck. So his mother continued to fight and fight to open up this investigation again. They did have 2 students that they kind of felt that had something to do with it. When they were questioning the rest of the students when this had originally happened, they were the only 2 that denied an interview with the police. They denied an interview with newscast reporters, and they never really spoke until 2015. They finally did an interview, and when you watch it, I feel like more keen to believe what they're saying. I don't believe that Kendrick's death was necessarily an accident. I'm not quite sure what I believe in regards to his death, but do I believe that those 2 boys had anything to do with it? I really don't know. At least the younger brother, because they were 2 brothers. The younger brother, I really don't feel like I believe it, just because he actually has an alibi. He was in his class. He wasn't tardy to any of his classes. There's no footage of him going or being nearby the gymnasium. However, the older brother, there is actual footage of him nearby the gymnasium, and there is even footage of him changing. However, when they interviewed him, when the reporters interviewed him, he did bring up the fact that he changed. He was in wrestling, and they had a wrestling meet later on that day, and he was getting ready to go for it. So he stated that he was walking towards the gym to get weighed in, and he was originally wearing a sweater, and when he came out from getting weighed in, he changed again because he was getting ready to get out of the school and go to wherever they were traveling to. So that was his thing as far as to why he changed. I also wanted to mention the footage that they were able to retrieve from the school was kind of choppy. Like, the timestamps didn't quite match, and every time that you would think that you're coming close to seeing something that would serve as evidence or would serve as something helpful to the investigation, it would always get cut off. So they really think that investigators and the Johnsons do believe that the school had something to do with how the footage was retrieved, and from what I know, they were fighting to get the hard drive from the schools directly, and I don't think that they were able to find any additional footage. All of the footage that I was able to find online, none of it really had enough information or enough evidence to show what could have exactly happened to Kendrick. There was also blood found in a locker room, and that was never tested. And when the police station was questioned in regards to why they never tested the other blood, they said that they tested it for Kendrick's blood and that it wasn't his, so they kind of felt like it was irrelevant to their investigation. But truly, that could have been something that could have been used to help out and see like who could have been involved with some things. Years after the investigation was already closed. The coroner was also able to find pictures of Kendrick's hand, where you'll find that there was scratch marks on his ring finger.
Well, this is a photo I'm sure most people have never seen. This is a photograph from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation from the first autopsy, the autopsy in which they determined that Kendrick Johnson's death was the result of positional asphyxia, this accident. If you look at his ring finger here on his left hand, you see cuts there by his nails.
Yeah, I see those cuts right there.
You see these cuts. This goes in line with the family's theory that there was a fight. Now, they are noted in the original autopsy, but they're not part of the narrative that was written by the state, by the local investigators, of how these cuts got on his fingers there. So the family believes that he was fighting before he ended up in that mat. Of course, they don't believe he went in by his own decision to go into the mat to grab a shoe 6 feet down, and he's 5'10". They believe that he was rolled in that mat as part of a cover-up.
All right, Joseph, you're looking at the hand here, and I'll put it under your control. What do you see of significance, and what, if anything, does this hand tell you?
Well, let's first go back to these tiny little lacerated areas that we have right here and right here. This is indicative of something that is fresh. These are not healing insults or injuries that he has. These little areas right here
so are they close to time of death?
Yeah, absolutely.
He basically stated that would kind of show that it would support the Johnson's theory of that there was a fight that broke out and he possibly could have gotten really horribly injured during the fight and was later rolled up into a mat, which is really terrifying to think about. When I watched that clip of the coroner talking about how not only the scratches on his finger kind of support their narrative of there being a fight, but his nail beds also show purple and blue, which are signs of asphyxiation. So he kind of threw out there the idea of, could it be possible that he was still living when he was rolled up into the mat? Because again, his shoulders were larger than the hole in the mat, but if you throw someone in the mat and you roll them up, that's a completely different story. And it could fit both narratives, where yes, there could have been a fight, and yes, this could still be foul play, but he probably could have been asphyxiated if they rolled him up in the mat and tossed him up, like standing up, and he was upside down and asphyxiated that way. So all of it kind of, when you put it all together that way, it makes a little bit more sense in regards to what could have happened. It seems like things just take a turn for the worst when I look farther into the case, as far as what continued to happen for the Johnsons and how they continued to fight. So I want to go ahead and jump into that. I realize that this might be a little bit blurry, but I wanted to record a little bit before I get into the rest of the video. I did find some additional information by this YouTube channel called George Boston Rhymes. It seems like he's a local in Valdosta, Georgia, and he posts a lot of things about what's going on in that town just in general. But I was able to find additional footage of the Johnsons. So a lot of the information that I found was information that was online that I'm going to talk about, but online for some reason that they actually talk about in their YouTube videos. A lot of the information that they continue to fight for Kendrick and all of that, it's not really brought up in like articles and things like that. So if you guys are interested in learning more about how they're continuing to fight, please follow that channel. It seems like they're constantly posting stuff. The last time they posted something about Kendrick was, I believe, a month ago. Yeah, literally just a month ago. So they are constantly posting updates. If you guys are interested in checking that out, I'm going to put the link down below to their most recent video. Some of them have the Johnsons on them, and some of them is a man talking about what's going on with Kendrick Johnson. That's not his father. I don't know what his relation is to Kendrick Johnson, but I will regardless link it down below so you guys can check it out. Lost so much when they tried to file a legal class lawsuit towards Valdosta, and they also tried getting the Bell family involved, which was the family with the two brothers. They actually ended up having to pay the Bell family $200,000 in legal fees because they ended up determining that they had nothing to do with it. And there was also a line that I read that the judge was speculating that the Johnsons had some false, that they had turned in false evidence. I didn't see anything coming out of that in regards to them determining whether yes or no it was false evidence, but all in all, it's just an awful, scary story for Kendrick's family, for the students that found Kendrick. It's just all really sad. A student's life was lost way too soon, whether it be due to an accident or whether it had some foul play that was involved. It's crazy to think about, and it's something that I just wanted to bring back to light for us to remember that some things like this do happen, and sometimes there is foul play involved. And when that happens, it's important for us to all gather together and look at everything, look at all of the evidence that is provided, and make sure that we're supporting the people that are wanting to fight for their family members, for their children, just for justice in general. And I do still hope that the Johnson family finds justice for Kendrick, and that they find peace, if they haven't found it already, that they find peace in their loved ones and the family that they still have left. It seems like it's going to be another one of our unsolved murders, and we're left to just speculate based on the information that's provided and based on what was determined by the police to believe or not believe the information that they went ahead and provided and what they determined the cause of death was. Either way, I hope all cases are distinctively looked into deeply and really passionately by any police force because of cases like Kendrick Johnson's. I feel like there was so many other things that could have been looked into that could have led to other answers if they would have just kind of kept more of the evidence and tested other things. If the footage from the cameras wouldn't have been so messed up, I feel like there were so many things that could have led to different answers. So no matter what, I hope that justice always ends up getting served, especially with cases like these. And that's all I can pray for the Johnson family and for any family that ever has to go through anything so tragic like this. I just found it so interesting how worldwide this was and how big of a deal it was for it to just end with the Johnsons having to pay so much in like legal fees. Stay safe, guys. Never stop fighting for justice. I hope you guys were able to enjoy this Truecrime Tuesday. I will see you guys here next Tuesday, unless you are into my Thursday happy videos that I am so excited about. I will see you guys then, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Bye!